based on the quality of the proposal and competency. Thank you.
Thank you. Meg, next question.
On the topic of audited financial statements, there is a question regarding the fact that there seems to be issues with viewing. Why are we not resolving the fact that no one can see the reports relating to a visual on the reports?
Again, the reports are available on the PEO website. So if you go to the PEO website and search financial statements, you can see them there. And next question.
Same category. What is the largest expense category?
As can be seen from the audited financial statements, the largest spend category is for staff salaries and benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. And next question.
Regarding the appointment of auditors, the bidding process to choose an auditor is done on a yearly basis.
Chetan, can you answer that?
Yes, thank you. In line with standard practice, the tendering process is conducted every 5 years. And again, the reappointment of the auditor is confirmed every year. Thank you.
Thank you. Meg, next question.
Another topic, another question regarding appointment of auditors. That means no Canadian accounting firm provides quality and competency enough. Do we have access to comparison report, which PEO has done on this topic?
Well, I think Chetan has answered that. We do a competency-based selection for the tender, and it's awarded every 5 years. So there would be a report that came to council for the award of the auditors, which could be viewed on the PEO website. So I think that question has been answered. Next question.
On the topic of audited financial statements, how much in the budget does PEO invest in Ontario in the next 5 years?
Chetan.
Thank you for the question. If I understand it correctly, pretty much all of the spend, the monies that have been set aside in the budget, they are for initiatives and they will be spent essentially in Ontario. So, thank you.
And even if Deloitte is an American company, they have a Canadian subsidiary that will be invoicing us. Meg, one more question, and then we will call the vote.
The question is on audited financial statements. What is the percentage of staff salary increase year over year?
Chetan?
Traditionally, it has been no more than 2.5%. That has essentially been based on merit, but that structure is constantly being reviewed and it will be revised based on best practices. So, thank you.
Thank you. So we will now call a vote, and all questions that were not answered during this section, we will get to more questions in the general Q&A at the end of the meeting, but any questions that weren't answered in either of those sections will be answered directly and posted on the PEO website. So I will now call for a vote on the motion to appoint Deloitte as PEO's auditors for the 2023 year. You have 30 seconds to submit your vote starting now. As a reminder, the resolution section is located to the right of the webcast window. Exit full screen mode to view this section. The resolution and voting choices will be displayed. After you vote, a message confirming vote successful will appear. If you want to change your vote, click on Cancel Vote and vote again accordingly. Your vote can be changed until voting closes. We will pause for a few seconds while voting is in progress. I will now report the results of the vote. The motion is carried. Thank you, everyone, for voting. I would now like to call upon PEO CEO and Registrar, Engineer Jennifer Gagliata, to provide us with her report for the 2022-2023 business year.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is my pleasure to be speaking with you today. Today marks my first AGM with PEO, having officially started in the CEO and Registrar's position this past January. I would therefore like to begin my remarks by acknowledging the work of my predecessor, Johnny Zucon, and his leadership on countless PEO initiatives, including many activities of the past year. Johnny had a remarkable career at PEO, culminating in a 4-year term as CEO and Registrar. Under Johnny's leadership, PEO undertook what is perhaps the most ambitious transformation in its 100-year history. With Johnny's oversight, PEO initiated an external expert review of its performance as the provincial engineering regulator. Council accepted the expert's report in principle in the spring of 2019, and subsequent to that, Council also adopted the resulting high-level action plan, activity filter, and 2-year governance renewal process. Many of these initiatives came to fruition during Johnny's tenure, while others will progress in the coming years. It was also under Johnny's guidance that staff, volunteers, and council achieved numerous other accomplishments in transforming PEO into an effective, modern regulator. Johnny's efforts, contributions, and accomplishments are highly commendable and are worth richly celebrating. Last year, PEO reached a major milestone when it celebrated its 100th anniversary of protecting and serving the public interest. It was on June 14, 1922, that the Ontario Legislature approved the original Professional Engineers Act, or PEA, which established PEO. To commemorate the event, a 16-page spread was published in Engineering Dimensions, complete with historical photos and interesting highlights. For example, licensure with PEO was optional to practice engineering in Ontario until 1937, and until 2000, PEO was a joint advocacy and regulatory body. PEO has grown from licensing just over 1,000 engineers in 1923 to over 94,000 engineers and firms today. PEO's role as a provincial engineering regulator has evolved throughout the past century, and our evolution is indeed a reflection on how Canadian society has changed over the past years. The centennial was also one of PEO's first opportunities to host an in-person celebration in over 2 years. On May 13th, 130 guests, including past and current council members, chapter chairs, and representatives of other regulatory and advocacy bodies, attended a gala highlighted with a keynote address from former CBC journalist and anchor Peter Mansbridge. The event, which included a networking reception and dinner, featured speeches by former CEO and Registrar Johnny Zucon and President Nick Colucci. In June 2022, Council approved a bold and transformative strategic plan that was launched this year and will extend into 2025. I call this our North Star, a guide to help us continue to modernize as an effective regulator. The strategic plan builds on PEO's previous plan, which was designed to help address recommendations stemming from the 2019 external review. Our transformation is an ongoing, organic, and evolving process, and on the following slides, I will highlight some of the activities initiated last year that continue in our current plan. An important recommendation from the 2019 external review was to establish a mandatory continuing professional development program, or CPD, that is proportionate, outcome-focused, and achievable by licensed engineers. Moreover, PEO has a responsibility to demonstrate to stakeholders that license holders maintain and build on their skill sets. In 2017, PEO had introduced a voluntary CPD program called PEAK. Since this time, participant and stakeholder feedback has helped to inform lessons learned and enable ongoing and continuous improvements. In 2021, Council agreed to move forward in converting the PEAK pilot project to a mandatory CPD program. This was the first step towards introducing a change to Section 51.2 of Regulation 941 under the PEA, which was approved by Provincial Cabinet last April. With that amendment, PEO joins all other provincial engineering regulators in having a mandatory CPD program and further advances as well as proclaims the engineering profession's commitment to continuous improvement and PEO's commitment to protecting the public interest. In the mandatory PEAK program, valid PEng and limited license holders are required to participate in the first two PEAK elements called the practice evaluation and professional practice modules every January. Both elements can be completed within an hour. The third element, the CPD report, is only for those who are actually practicing or plan to resume active practice. It is due every December 31st and contains potentially up to 30 hours of professional development activities. The first 2 months of 2023 saw almost 3/4 of license holders begin the first two required PEAK elements, a great, tremendous success. Throughout 2022, PEO embarked on a journey of engagement and communication to help support license holders during the transition to mandatory PEAK. In addition, last spring, a public survey was issued to solicit feedback, which received over 8,800 responses. Over 3/4 of participants were supportive of a custom approach to PEAK, where the requirement for CPD activity hours would be linked to a license holder's specific practice. Furthermore, 2/3 of respondents were in favor of the inclusion of non-verifiable activities, such as the reading of technical manuals, to be eligible towards CPD hours. Building on your feedback, both of these ideas were incorporated as key features of the new program. PEO staff have also supported our 90,000 license holders via a communication mail-out campaign, which included helpful information and resources. PEO's website and our Engineering Dimensions magazine have also provided informative material regarding license holders' responsibilities under PEAK. PEO, like many other regulators in Ontario, is accountable to the Office of the Fairness Commissioner, which administers the Fair Access to Regulated Professions and Compulsory Trades Act, or as we call it, FARPACTA. Under FARPACTA, regulated professions must demonstrate transparency and fairness in their licensing practices, particularly for internationally trained applicants. With the introduction of new FARPACTA requirements to be effective by July 1st, 2023, PEO will be required to make licensing decisions within 6 months for 90% of internationally trained applicants, which, because of our volumes of people in that category, we have determined for the sake of fairness to meet all new applicants. Additionally, PEO must acknowledge receipt of all complete applications within 10 days and make a licensing decision for mobility applicants within 30 days of receiving a complete application. Finally, as of December 2nd, 2023, the requirement for applications to have Canadian engineering experience in order to seek PEO licensure will be removed. This is notable because under our current licensing model, all applicants must have acquired a minimum of 12 months of Canadian experience under the supervision of a Canadian licensed engineer to receive their license. Building on the aforementioned guidelines, PEO has committed to making a decision on all licensure applicants, regardless of whether they were educated in Canada or abroad, within the prescribed FARPACTA deadlines. Throughout 2022, staff with oversight from Council's Regulatory Policy and Legislation Committee worked to develop a streamlined FARPACTA-compliant licensing process that emulates as closely as possible PEO's existing standards. This is advantageous because it will allow PEO to more quickly assess candidates' suitability to practice in Ontario while maintaining the educational component of our licensure requirements. Stemming from this new licensing model is the suspension of the engineering intern program. PEO continues to actively explore viable solutions to help recent engineering graduates navigate their experience requirements for licensure. PEO's new licensing model will meet a key pillar in our 2023 to 2025 strategic plan, which aims to improve our licensing processes without compromising public safety. Throughout 2022, PEO continued on its journey of modernization. With a focus on digital transformation, PEO introduced a new online PEng application system in July. As of next month, applicants will be able to submit an application electronically and upload all supporting documentation instead of having to submit their documentation via email. This is a quicker and much more efficient way of submitting an application and a significant advancement over previous processes. Previously, applicants were required to complete a fillable PDF system, download it, and email it to PEO. And prior to 2020, applicants were required to fill out a paper application and mail it to our office. Another example of PEO's digital transformation is its information discovery and digitization capability project initiated in 2021 to digitize 24,000 active paper-based PEng license files. This large undertaking, which is now nearly complete, allows PEO staff to access application documents simultaneously, allowing us to evaluate applicants' academic and experience background in parallel, thereby enabling us to make licensing decisions much quicker. The Professional Engineers Act gives Council the authority to establish, develop, and maintain standards of practice that must be adhered to by all engineers. Practice guidelines are documents that provide advice and recommendations on engineering best practices, specifically around performing engineering work in accordance with the Act. PEO is constantly revising and reviewing its practice standards and guidelines for its license holders. PEO staff worked diligently in 2022 developing or revising 4 guidelines. New guidelines were developed to support engineers providing services for the demolition of buildings and other structures. The purpose of this guideline is to offer professional engineers with guidance on the level of diligence required with the responsibility expected in their work. Another guideline looks at pre-start health and safety, which brings an undertaking to the level of diligence, methods, and reporting acceptable to PEO for this type of work. Additionally, 2 guidelines were revised, including the guideline concerning the use of the engineer's seal, which reflects changes to the regulation amendments which took effect last July, and a guideline for temporary works for construction projects, which brings attention to the basic requirements, procedures, and duties necessary to achieve a proper design and installation or construction of such projects. I am proud to be part of an organization that has a commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and I am passionate about advancing our efforts in these areas. I am delighted to be supporting the work stemming from the 30 by 30 task force, which began in 2018 in alignment with Engineers Canada's goal of ensuring that 30% of new licensed engineers are women by the year 2030. We are not quite there yet. The percentage of women applying for PEO licensure is still significantly lower than men. In 2021, approximately 21% of license recipients were women. Addressing why women are not seeking and obtaining licensure is an important topic that warrants its own discussion, but our organization is committed to making sure that PEO's licensed engineers reflect Ontario's population and society. The 30 by 30 task force was stood down in December of 2021, and the task force's work was operationalized by PEO staff. The task force set key performance indicators in several key areas, and Council has made a 10-year commitment to track and measure the progress of women and applying for and successfully obtaining licensure. Arising from the 30 by 30 task force is an ongoing gender audit of PEO's licensure process and internal operations. The audit is ongoing with participation of experts from the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management. From a review of more than 100,000 applications for licensure, the research team observed that although women are as successful as men at completing the academic component of PEO's licensure requirement, women are not necessarily completing the experience component at the same rate as men. The research is still in its preliminary stages, so it is still too early to draw any conclusions, but further analysis is to come. As an aside, we will continue to keep a close eye on our new licensing application model, where the experience component will have to complete it at the time to be completed at a time the application is submitted to observe the rate of women successfully obtain their PEO license. As I near the end of my talk today, I would also like to highlight PEO's Anti-Racism and Equity Code, which Council voted to endorse in April of 2022. Under this code, PEO endorses 8 foundational principles for informing strategies and actions as it promotes policy development approaches to prioritize diversity and inclusion in the most marginalized communities. PEO also continues to develop strategies to counter systemic discrimination. Our 8 principles include continual improvements of our regulatory processes, training, supporting a human rights culture at PEO, and reinforcing the professional obligations of our license holders to uphold human rights laws in respect to equity, diversity, and inclusion. Finally, I am proud to emphasize that respect for equity, diversity, and inclusion is a key pillar of our strategic plan, our North Star. If PEO is to continue to remain relevant to our stakeholders as a regulator and an organization, we must continue to make efforts for adequately reflecting the society that we aim to protect and serve, and it is my genuine pleasure to support these efforts. In close, I extend my thanks to each of you for attending today's event. I congratulate all of the hard work that the PEO staff have done over the past year, and I look forward to the rest of our agenda. With that, Mr. Chair, I hand the podium back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer and Johnny, for your outstanding efforts and those of your staff over the past year. It has been a pleasure working alongside you and your team. If you have a question or a comment, click on Ask a Question in the bottom of the screen. Then click on Type a Question. From the drop-down menu, select CEO Registrar's Report, type your message within the box, and click the blue Submit button. To maintain full transparency during this meeting, all clarifications automatically are associated with your login name. Questions will be addressed during the general Q&A portion of the meeting as time permits. All questions that were asked but unanswered during this meeting will be answered after the AGM and posted to the website. I'd now like to share my thoughts on the business conducted by Council over the 2022-2023 term and reflections as your president. As my term as PEO president concludes, I have reflected on the progress PEO has made over the past year, as well as on our centennial on June 14th, when we celebrated 100 years regulating the engineering profession in Ontario. Our anniversary served as both a recommitment to our public protection mandate as a modern regulator, as well as a reminder of the great privilege we have in self-regulation. Before I walk us through our work and accomplishments over the term, I would like to say that it was my privilege to serve as PEO's 103rd president over this milestone year. And to keep this privilege, it is paramount that the trust of Ontarians is maintained through accountability, fair, equitable, and transparent regulatory processes, all developed through a public interest lens. Over the past council term, we made key decisions in support of this trust, both to the public we serve and to the engineers we regulate. In May, we held a 2-day strategic planning workshop to lay the groundwork for PEO's 2023 to 2025 strategic plan. Our sessions were informed by feedback gathered by stakeholder consultations, a license holder survey, a public focus group, an internal capacity analysis, and a regulatory environmental scan that were conducted to identify the capacity, gaps, and opportunities we considered in our strategic planning process. As decided at this workshop, PEO's new mission statement is to regulate the practice of professional engineering in Ontario to safeguard life, health, property, economic interests, the public welfare, and the environment. And our new goals include improving PEO's licensing process without compromising public safety, optimizing organizational performance, implementing a continuous governance improvement program, and refreshing PEO's vision to ensure all stakeholders see relevance and value in PEO. We formally accepted these goals at our June meeting of Council. In September, we adopted a new data protection policy to ensure the data privacy of license holders and other stakeholders is maintained and strengthened. To confirm PEO adheres to all relevant data and privacy protection legislation, the policy outlines what data PEO can share and when it can do so, unless otherwise specified or legally required. All stakeholder data will remain secured behind PEO's license holder portal. Also in September, we approved a bylaw amendment incorporating the governance committees established in 2021. Approved the guideline on attendance at council and governance committee meetings to outline the rules for observers of council and committee meetings, and approved a bylaw amendment related to meeting transparency and incorporating the existing council-approved approach to agendas and minutes to apply to all council and committee meetings. In November, we made important decisions supporting PEO's licensure improvement goals by recognizing that a bachelor's degree in engineering program in Engineers Canada's International Institutions and Degrees database submitted to completing a confirmatory examination program is equivalent to a bachelor's degree in a Canadian engineering program that is accredited to council satisfaction. We also approved the use of a competency-based assessment model to confirm that a licensed applicant has sufficient experience to practice engineering. And in March, Council directed staff to begin work with the Ministry of the Attorney General on amending Regulation 941 to remove the Canadian experience requirement for licensure. We will initiate further study to explore and address any unintended consequences of this change. These changes, combined with a shift to front-end academic and experience requirements for licensure, will also help us comply with the amendments to the Fair Access to Regulated Professions and Compulsory Trades Act, as we know as FARFACTA. The changes will go ahead shortly, beginning on May 15th. These licensing improvements initiatives demonstrate PEO's commitment to a licensing system that ensures all qualified applicants are licensed fairly and without undue delay so they can actively work in their chosen profession. In February, as part of the governance roadmap, Phase 4 risk assessment process, we stood down several committee and subcommittees which are neither governance nor regulatory. They included the Advisory Committee on Volunteers, the Education Committee and Education Conference Planning Subcommittee, the Equity and Diversity Committee, the External Honors Subcommittee, the Gala Advisory Committee, the PEO OAA Joint Liaison Committee, the PEO OSPI Joint Relations Committee, and the Volunteer Leadership Conference Planning Committee. On behalf of Council, I would like to thank all of those committee members for their volunteer service and contributions to the profession. A letter to these volunteers was sent out, including a certificate of appreciation and my personal thanks for their dedicated service. In March, also as part of the governance roadmap risk assessment process, we made decisions around chapter activities in the neither category, including improving to support chapter activities such as AGMs, technical seminars, networking events, and scholarships. We also approved supporting the modifications chapter activities such as license certificate presentations, education outreach and licensure assistance program, GLP activities, and chapter support of community organizations. We also approved the updated governance manual, which integrates the charters, protocols, and other directions approved by Council as part of the governance roadmap. And over the term, we oversaw the implementation of PEO's mandatory continuing professional development program, PEAK, which came into effect on January 1st, 2023. The program protects the public by helping to ensure license holders practice competently and ethically. Annual compliance audits and non-compliance sanctions will be introduced in 2024. To provide staff the leadership to make these changes happen, in December, we appointed a new CEO registrar, Jennifer Quagliata, who took charge in January 2023. She takes over from Johnny Zucon, who announced his intention to retire last March after almost 30 years at PEO, including the past 5 as CEO Registrar. Jennifer is a graduate of the MBA program from Rotman School of Management and the University of Toronto's Bachelor of Applied Science and Engineering program. Before joining PEO, Jennifer worked in leadership positions in the public and private sectors, including the Healthcare Insurance Reciprocal of Canada, North York General Hospital, Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, among others. Before signing off, and on behalf of PEO Council, I extend a special thanks to Jennifer, Johnny, the executive leadership team, and the entire PEO staff. Thank you for all your hard work over the last year, and thank you for making my year as president fairly easy. Johnny has led PEO during its most ambitious change project in our 100-year history, beginning with the 2019 External Regulatory Performance Review. Johnny guided PEO on its transformation to become a modern regulator. Over this time, Johnny has led PEO to build and roll out a mandatory CPD program, begin the process of simplifying and streamlining our licensing system, overhaul PEO's organizational structure so we have the capacity to meet our objectives, and improve our ability to regulate using right-touch regulatory principles and adopting an outward-looking approach to guide our decisions that impact our public interest. On behalf of Council, thank you, Johnny, for your years of valuable and enthusiastic commitment to PEO, and enjoy your retirement. I would also like to thank all of you for the trust you placed in me to lead our council this year, and a big thank you to the outgoing council for its hard work over the term. As we enter a new century, we have made significant gains in our modernization efforts as a regulator. I wish incoming President Royden Fraser all the best during his term as he leads council into our second century. I look forward to working with Royden and council to help usher in a new phase in PEO's history. Thank you. If you have a question or comment, click on Ask a Question in the bottom of the screen, then click on Type a Question from the drop-down menu, select President's Outgoing Report, type your message within the box, and click the blue Submit button. We will pause for 30 seconds to provide an opportunity to submit any questions. To maintain full transparency during this meeting, all clarifications automatically are associated with your login name. At this point, we'll address some of the questions as we move to the general Q&A portion of this meeting. So Meg, do we have any questions?
Yes, on the topic of CEO Registrar's report, the question is, why did Peak have so many issues and problems when we tried to use it?
Thank you, Meg. We are responding to the lessons learned during this year's Peak rollout, including both technical and substantive concerns in advance of next year's shift to make it enforceable.
And to add to that, we had extremely positive response at the very beginning, which we have about 75% of our members have now done Peak. So I think that was over what we had planned for. Meg, next question.
On the topic of the President's report, were the centennial celebrations on June 14th or May 14th? Nick said June 14th, but there's a recollection that it was May 14th, and the questioner asked for clarity.
Good question. I can't remember what date it was on. I think it was on June 14th.
I can answer that. It was on May 14th.
Okay. Sorry about that. For the next question, I just wanted to let everyone know that we have 344 attendees and 248 of them are voting members. So thank you everyone for joining. Next question.
On the topic of CEO Registrar's report, the accountants have requested and received full exemption from FARPACTA. Has PEO applied for such an exemption as per clause 10.2 in the Act?
I know we have not applied. There was the possibility of apply for health and safety requirements, but when we reviewed those requirements, we did not find the possibility for an exemption. And I don't know, Jennifer, if you could add to that.
Of course, PEO maintains a good relationship with the Fairness Commissioner. It was clear that an exemption would be unlikely and moreover would not be in keeping with the spirit and the purpose of the FARPACTA amendments.
Thank you. And next question.
On the topic of the President's report, will PEO ensure that all new and incumbent councillors attend and participate in training and onboarding to ensure that all members of council understand their duties and the rules of council as a governing board of a regulator?
Great question. And yes, we have onboarding actually next week, and all of council can participate in training that the CEO registrar will be distributing to all new councillors and existing councillors.
And regarding the CEO registrar's report, the question is, will non-completion of peak requirements affect one's PEO benefits, such as the Manulife insurance program?
Insurance is within the purview of the insurer. We would hope that licensed engineers in good standing will continue to benefit from any programs. Anything else is left up to the insurer. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe the TD Meloche Monix insurance program is available to engineers, to any engineers in Ontario. But next question.
Regarding the president.
Good.
Regarding the president's report, how do you expect to meet the 30 by 30 objective when you have stood down the committee promoting this?
Jennifer, sure.
Yep. Regarding the ARA code and equity overall, we are in the process of ensuring that we have staff and external resources to ensure that we honor the code and the commitments that we have made as they've now turned over to the operational aspects of the business.
Thank you. Meg, next question.
And on the topic of the CEO registrar's report, why do the adjustments to licensure feel as though they take a combative response to the requirements set by government, specifically the requirement to provide a timely response? And working from presumption that this is true, what actions could the PEO take to reduce the disproportionate impact on new engineers, internationally trained immigrants, and academics?
Regarding the licensing, I'll just provide an overall very high level response to that. In relation to licensing changes, of course, the organization, along with council, continues to study the impacts of the decisions that were made. This is a commitment that, again, both the organization and the council has made to continue learning and to continue to study the impacts and provide those questions through our regulatory and policy licensing committee as we then review what the potential solutions could be. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
And going back to the audited financial statements area, what is the percentage of staff explain the large increase in chapter cost allotments. Chapter cost allotments have not increased. I'll read that again. Explain the large increase in the chapter cost. Allotments have not increased.
Chetan, can you answer that?
Thank you for the question. In a nutshell, the reason for that is in 2022, essentially, because with the elimination of a large proportion of the pandemic related restrictions, a lot of the chapter related activities that could not proceed and take place in 2021 and 2020 essentially were able to proceed, and which is why we are seeing an increase in chapter expenses for the fiscal 2022. Thank you.
Thank you.
Regarding the President's
question.
report, with the removal of the need for Canadian experience as a prerequisite for licensure, what has replaced the determination of the goals of the need for Canadian experience?
Well, so there is still 4 years of experience required, but there is not 4 years or any need for Canadian experience in that experience part. So international applicants will have 4 years of experience in the country where they're coming from.
May I also add on to our president's remarks that we do also now have a competency-based assessment tool that we are introducing in the new process as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And next question.
On the topic of the CEO Registrar's report, other than achieving the 30 by 30 target for women in engineering, what specific actions is the PEO doing to achieve provincial targets in all other equity deserving groups, such as Indigenous, visible minorities, and the LGBTQ2+ demographics?
We have currently partnered with the University of Toronto Rotman School of Management to undertake a research study in relation to the broader questions that you've asked, and are hoping within the next year to have that report to then be able to implement changes to our operations as it relates to any gaps that will be identified.
Thank you. And next question, Meg.
A question from the audited financial statements report. What are the anticipated financial impacts to PEO's budget after restricting non-BEng graduates from applying for licensure?
Thank you for the
Sounds
question.
like a question for you, Chetan.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We would be working on the 2024 budget, and when we do so, we would be factoring in all of these and other impacts. And once that information is available, it would be presented to the board for review and subsequent approval. Thank you.
And next question, Meg.
On the topic of the CEO Registrar's report, thank you for the introduction of the digital applications. Would there be an online visibility on every stage of application for PEO applicants in this new digital transformation?
That's a great question, and one that we will take back for consideration as our new process will launch on May 15th. And in addition to that, any questions as they relate to licensing and its processes, you can simply send an email to applicants@peo.on.ca. In the coming weeks, we'll have more information on the website, and so multiple avenues for both questions and reflections to come in. And thank you.
Thank you. And next question.
On the topic of the President's report, why is PEO very vague at explaining what qualifies as CPD hours? This question has been asked many times, but never answered.
Well, I could take a crack at that. I think it's you are determining your own CPD hours. So not that it's vague. There's two categories of CPD hours. One is if you're taking a course in class, and one is if you're, say, attending a seminar. both of those would qualify as CPD. And that's why it's left vague, because you have to determine that yourself. It's a self-directed CPD program. I don't know if Jennifer can add to that, but if you've gone through the program, it's pretty simple. It's not too complicated. There's two categories. You can pick one or the other. So, Jennifer?
Yeah, regarding the hours, the goal is really to make this a recognition of the hours of professional development that most of our members already do, rather than impose additional requirements. Any further questions that any of the folks here today on the call have can also send an email to peopeak@peo.on.ca.
Thank you. And next question.
Back to the audited financial statements report. Why are the staff salaries and benefits increased by 10.95% in 2022 compared to the year 2021?
Thank you for the question. The answer to that is that increase is entirely due to the increase in headcount that we've had in 2022. We had the figure that you're seeing for 2022 reflects 124 full-time staff, whereas we had 115 for 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Chetan. And next question, Meg.
On the topic of CPD, for the CPD reporting requirement, the requirement is that the registered member should be practicing with PEO for at least 12 months. Is that understanding correct?
Jennifer?
All of the details all of the details centered around the PEAK program can be found on the website, or by simply sending an email to peopeak@peo.on.ca.
Thank you. And Meg, next question.
Another question regarding PEAK. Why do we include non-practicing or retired members in PEAK? How many members are dropping out of PEO, and what proportion of the membership does that represent?
We may not have those answers now, but we will comment back to you. But if you're a non-practicing or retired member, you only have to do the first section of PEAK. You don't have to do the second part of PEAK. So it's fairly simple, but I think staff will get back to you with all those numbers as to how many people are dropping out, because I think that was included in Jennifer's last update. Thank you. And Meg, next question.
On the topic of the CEO Registrar's report, is a risk and mitigation report available for the Canadian Experience amendments?
As an amendment is required, the impact assessment will just begin to start in the coming weeks, as the council had just made this decision at the end of our last council meeting in March.
Thank you. And I think we're almost at 15 minutes, so let's make this our last question. And just a reminder that any questions that don't get answered during this section will be answered directly and posted on the website. So Meg, the last question, please.
With EIT process removed, how would PEO ensure newly trained engineers obtain the required experience?
Jennifer, that would be for you, I guess.
Yeah. Regardless of status, all applicants are required to submit 4 years of experience under the supervision of a licensed professional. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will now stand at ease to take a brief break and reconvene in 5 minutes. So that would be at 10:20. Thank you very much. I now recall this meeting to order. At this time, we will move to discuss the license holder submission. Each year, in accordance with Section 17 of Bylaw Number 1, we invite submissions from license holders as a way for them to express their views on matters relating to PEO affairs. Submissions were due at the end of day on Wednesday, April 19th, and a guidance document to assist license holders in making submissions was posted on PEO's website. One submission was received, and the complete submission is available on the PEO website. Members making submissions were provided the opportunity to pre-record an introduction to their submission of up to 2 minutes. After the submission has been presented, we will allot a limited period of time to address questions received, followed by a vote of license holders, which will help inform council on the level of support for the submission amongst those present at the AGM. A recording by the submitter will also be played. Council reserves the right to consider any submission, even if it does not receive majority support at the AGM. And council is not bound to adopt or vote formally on any submission. I'll begin with the submission now. Proposed by James Andrew Smith, seconded by David Efstrom. This is a submission by James Andrew Smith. Full details on this submission can be found on the PEO website. We'll now hear a pre-recorded message on this submission from the mover, James Andrew Smith.
The following is a submission to the PEO AGM for April 2023 on COVID-19 misinformation in PEO Council's agenda. My name is James Smith. I am submitting on behalf of myself, Mr. David Elfstrom, and Mr. Joseph Fox. We are all three licensed professional engineers in the province of Ontario. The council agenda item in question was entitled Repealing the Entering PEO Office Protocols. It was prepared and moved by Mr. Gregory Wochuk, and it includes in Appendix B a link to COVID-19 misinformation from the Canadian COVID Care Alliance. The linked presentation is not credible. It's filled with fringe conspiracy theories, and the false claims contained within were well documented in the media. Just as important, the website, including the page that the presentation is found on, contains disclaimers that say, for instance, do not make any decisions based on the information contained or presented on this website without consulting an appropriate professional. People associated with the CCCA have been investigated by both the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario and the media. Dr. Ira Bernstein has been under investigation by the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, and his practice has been restricted because of issues related to COVID-19. Other medical practitioners associated with Dr. Bernstein have been either suspended by CPSO or found to have engaged in professional misconduct with respect to COVID-19. We should all be concerned about how the public views the use of conspiracy theories in our documentation at PEO. The College of Physicians and Surgeons investigations are a giant red flag, and Council should retract the motion and publish a statement rejecting misinformation about COVID-19, and finally examine changes to governance and election processes to help prevent this sort of thing from happening in the future.
As a reminder, to make comments or ask questions, click on Ask a Question in the bottom of the screen. Then click on Type a Question, choose the appropriate topic, type your message within the box, and click the blue Submit button. We will pause for 20 seconds to provide an opportunity to submit any questions. Please ensure your comments or questions relate to the matter under discussion. All questions that were asked but unanswered during this meeting will be answered after the AGM and posted to the website. To maintain full transparency during the meeting, all comments automatically are associated with your login name. In addition, James Andrew Smith is available by audio to respond to questions received. Meg, can you please let me know if we've received any questions or comments?
Yes, we have a comment. There was no concern regarding the motion in that briefing note. The concerns raised were regarding the listed reference webpage. It is well past due for the council to repeal the requirement for the second dose of this vaccine for a councillor to attend the meetings in person. This has been raised at the previous council meetings a couple of times since last year as well. And this has been preventing some councillors from attending council meetings in person. The effect of the second dose after a year of receiving is minimal. Ontario started the 5th round of vaccine in early fall 2022. We now know that the vaccine reduces the severity of COVID-19 if one is infected, but does not provide immunity to COVID-19. And the last point in the question is, unlike wearing masks, which PEO abandoned in its requirement in 2022, this vaccine does not protect other individuals in case one has the virus. That's a comment. There's another comment, Mr. Chair.
Sure, let me respond to that comment. So, just to be clear, that motion was pulled from the agenda prior to the council meeting because staff were already working on updating the policy to not require vaccination to attend the office. So that's one of the reasons. So, that's a staff thing. The council motion that happened earlier in the year was that council would follow whatever requirements staff had. So, in this case, the staff requirements are being changed. So council, whatever they change to, will have to follow that. Anyway, next comment.
The motion includes other elements other than COVID-19. Please read in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th actions requested.
Can we
a
have
request
that
to-
up on the screen?
A request to review the motion.
Right. Can we have the full motion up on the screen?
Yeah.
There it is. So the full motion says the council motion in question be formally retracted. Number 2, council release a formal statement rejecting the inclusion of misinformation in its business. Number 3, councillors be required to engage with governance education and or obtain governance designations prior to participating in council business. Number 4, future potential councillors receive communications prior to elections regarding desired qualifications and required duties. And in the lead up to elections, members should be clearly notified in writing of candidate status within PEO, i.e. practicing status, disciplinary history, and any potential conflicts of interest. Okay, next comment.
I'll read another comment. My 6 statements on the genesis of the original council motion are true. We were fearful at the time and acted hastily. My 3 statements about the current science on COVID also were true. Vaccination does not prevent infection or transmission. Current mutations are more transmissible and less dangerous. There's a risk of serious injury or death from the injections themselves. In my motion, I also correctly noted that PEO essentially already was ignoring its protocol, except for the vaccination requirement. Engineer Smith and I are not medical professionals, so we have no right to pontificate what is misinformation. Many world-class medical experts, titans in their professions, however, have challenged this narrative.
If I may,
Thank you. Yes.
since I was addressed in that statement, if I may.
Yes, James. Yeah.
Okay. So what's important to point out about that motion is the only documented piece of apparent evidence that was provided was the conspiracy theory. Nothing else was provided in terms of a reference. So the motion itself is tainted by the fact that no actual verifiable referenced citations were provided in there. The College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. So if we're going to talk about titans, we're going to talk about titans of regulatory bodies. The CPSO has investigated the co-founder of the website that provided that presentation. As a profession, we should be looking to CPSO and the investigations that they conducted as a giant red flag for the process that was followed to put this on the agenda in the first place. And the two people who are responsible for it are highly placed in council. And so the governance issues that are related or that are spoken about in the motion are very relevant because of the two people who are associated with this motion. They did something that does not demonstrate skill or judgment in my mind.
Thank you. And Meg, next comment or question.
Yes, one question. Can we remove the mandatory education passage as this amounts to board programming? I appreciate your attention to false facts and support the spirit of this motion.
So is that requesting an amendment to the motion? I don't think we normally do that for license holder submissions. But we, obviously this information will certainly come back to council with all the comments and questions. So understood. And council is already undergoing training. So there is some, not mandatory training, but there is training for counselors, and there is mandatory requirements for candidates to do certain things as well, which is also being looked at by some of our governance committees. So it's good. Next one, Meg.
What specifically was misinformation regarding COVID?
Andrew or James, can you answer that?
I will refer, because I'm not an expert in COVID vaccinations, I will refer the questioner to the Toronto Star article and to the CPSO documentation that was provided in the submission. I think that's the appropriate thing to do here.
Thank you. And Meg, next comment.
I'm going to review another category to ensure that there are no license holder submissions in the other category. So stand by one moment, please. I see no other license holder submission questions in the other category.
Thank you, Meg, and thank you, James, for joining us. So I'll now call for a vote. You have 30 seconds to submit your vote starting now. As a reminder, for voting on this submission, the resolution section is located to the right of the webcast window. Exit full screen mode to view this section. The resolution voting choices will be displayed. After you vote, a message confirming vote successful will appear. If you want to change your vote, click on Cancel Vote and vote again accordingly. Your vote can be changed until voting closes. Okay, so I will now report the results of the vote. And 77% have voted for and 23% have voted against. So that motion carries. Thank you, and thank you for the license holder engagement. We now are at the end of the 2023 license holder submissions, and thank you for the submitters. The members of the 2022-2023 Council have worked diligently to move the profession forward. I would like to express my personal appreciation to all of you for your collaboration and for your support and encouragement throughout the year. It has indeed been a pleasure serving as your president and chair. I would like to thank you and recognize each of those who are retiring from council for their service to the profession. during this very important year. And although many have served on a variety of committees, task forces, and in other roles during their volunteer history with PEO, I will only make reference to their additional contribution while serving as councillors during their current term. Let's begin with Christian Bellini, past president. Christian has served stints on council, most recently since 2020, when he served as president-elect in 2020-21, president in 2021-22, and most recently as past president over the 2022-2023 council term. He left very big shoes to fill, and I was happy to have him on council as my past president to give me guidance and support. Next, we have Chantel Chittle, councillor at large. Chantel has also been on council since 2020, serving as councillor at large, appointed VP, and RPLC. Thank you for all your help. Next, we have Jim Chisholm, West Central Region Councillor. Jim has been on council since 2021, serving as West Central Region Councillor and on the RPLC. And Jim is why we have the environment as one of our goals in our strategic plan. Next, we have Randy Walker, Eastern Region Councillor. Randy has been on council since 2019, serving as Eastern Region Councillor and on the Audit and Finance Committee, and also the IT support when the president needs chargers for his phone. Next, we have Robert Brunet, Lieutenant Governor and Council appointee. Robert, who retired from council in January, served on council since 2020. During this time, he also served on the Audit and Finance and Audit and Finance committees. Thank you all for your continuous dedication and support. I would now like to invite Royden Fraser to take his place as the 104th President of Professional Engineers Ontario by reciting our oath of office. Royden.
Thank you, President Colucci. I solemnly pledge to discharge my duties as President of Professional Engineers Ontario to the best of my ability, in good faith, and with goodwill, and in accordance with the Professional Engineers Act, regulations, and bylaws. To fulfill the self-governing responsibilities entrusted to the profession by the Government of Ontario.
Congratulations, President Fraser. I now invite President Fraser to don the chain of office, which acknowledges the responsibilities, authority, and dignity attached to the office of the President of PEO, and continue with his presentation. Mr. President, the meeting is yours.
Thank you, past President Colucci. Before I make some remarks as your new president, I would like to take this opportunity to make a special presentation to acknowledge his just completed term of the office as PO President. On behalf of PO Council, I would like to thank Nick and express our sincere appreciation for all your work and effort for both PO and the profession. At Council's March 31st meeting, we presented the past president with tokens of appreciation: an amethyst inukshuk, a framed copper embossed art card, a certificate of appreciation, a past president's lapel pin, and our outgoing president's award. Today, we are pleased to present him with a lifetime PO membership certificate. Again, thank you so very much for your service, past President Colucci. Bonjour and good day. Engineering can truly be called the great profession, and we can all be very proud to be connected to that profession. On a personal note, I am very honored to be your 104th President of the Association of Professional Engineers Ontario, and grateful for this opportunity to guide the engineering profession into the future. But where is the future of engineering regulation headed? What opportunities and obstacles lay before us? This is a conversation that starts today. As PO embarks over the next year on a strategic goal to refresh PO's vision to ensure stakeholders see relevance and value in PEO. And this is a conversation and goal I hope to see each and every one of you contribute to. When elected last year as president-elect, I personally introduced and argued for the vision goal to be one of PEO's 4 strategic priorities, and was very glad, encouraged, and had optimism restored concerning the future of the regulated engineering profession in Canada when Council agreed. For us to kick off PEO's future vision conversation, a good place to start is to look back and see what we can learn from history. The words engine and ingenious are both derived from the Latin root ingenerare, which means to create. And in the mid-1500s, the makers of war engines, such as catapults and assault towers, were referred to as ingénieurs or engineers. Then, not long after, in the early 1600s, the word engineer took on today's more general civil sense of referring to an inventor, a designer. Next came the simultaneous emergence of 2 societal transformations: the Industrial Revolution and the increasing reliability of science. The first Industrial Revolution is identified by mechanization with steam and water power. In the first Industrial Revolution, from the mid-1700s to the mid-1800s, industrial production utilizing steam power surpassed the output of craftspersons and artisans, greatly increasing the demand for engineering skills. In parallel, science provided engineers with the means for technological advancement. Then, from the mid-1800s to around 1930, came the Second Industrial Revolution, identified by mass production with assembly lines powered by electricity. And it is towards the end of the Second Industrial Revolution that the regulated profession of engineering emerged as society began to appreciate the dangers associated with engineering and began to expect greater accountability from governments and practitioners. Thus, PO was born June 14th, 1922, as we heard. One of the key elements of this birth of the regulated engineering profession in Canada was a recognition that the protection of the public safety could be enhanced if practitioners had an invested interest in regulation, and therefore self-regulation was also born in Canada. While the first licensed professional engineers were traditional civil, mechanical, electrical, chemical, and mining engineers, over the following decades, as technology advanced, new fields of engineering emerged, such that today in Canada alone, we have over 70 different engineering programs with many subspecialties. For example, my own Department of Mechanical and Mechatronics Engineering at the University of Waterloo has 5 subspecialties of automation, solid mechanics, materials, fluid mechanics, and thermodynamics. The point is, today engineering spans a wide range of disciplines, has become very multidisciplinary, and new disciplines will continue to emerge. But is the regulated profession capable of handling more than the traditional engineering disciplines and slight variations thereof? And if capable, should it regulate emerging engineering disciplines? These are just 2 of the many questions to be asked as PO embarks on the strategic vision goal to ensure all stakeholders see relevance and value in the PEng. So let's continue the history lesson just a bit longer to see what insights it might yield concerning possible futures for the regulated profession in Canada. I've already mentioned 2 of the 4 industrial revolutions that have so far come to pass. Next in line is the third industrial revolution from about 1930 to 2000, which is characterized by electronic and information technology, IT systems, including computers, robotics, automation. While the fourth revolution, industrial revolution, from about 2000 to present, is characterized by datification of virtually everything, creating unlimited information, leading to autonomous decision-making by cyber-physical systems. A very real, impactful example of this fourth industrial revolution is ChatGPT. For those not familiar with ChatGPT, it is a large machine learning language module designed to understand natural language input from users and then generate human-like responses in real time. In a matter of weeks of its November 2022 release, it, for example, completely changed and eliminated how many academic assessments could be done with its ability to quickly compose original, quality essays on a wide range of topics, and with its ability to write computer code. Did you grasp what I just said? In less than 6 months, in fact, just weeks, new technology had completely upended much in the academic assessment world, making obsolete many traditional assessment tools and methods. Other applications quickly found for ChatGPT include use in generating product descriptions and social media posts for businesses, generating news articles and research papers for journalists and academics, writing creative content for poems or even movie and TV show scripts, and much more. As for the fifth industrial revolution, many claim we are at the start of it today, but its definition has not yet been settled. Regardless, all agree it will involve artificial intelligence. In brief, engineering rose to prominence because of the early industrial revolutions being directly correlated with increases in economic activity and corresponding increases in standard of living through the manipulation of energy and materials. In contrast, the modern industrial revolutions are less about energy and materials and more about information and its use. This shift to the importance of information started with computer systems in the second industrial revolution, expanded into IT systems in the third industrial revolution, accumulating today with the fourth industrial revolution being almost entirely about information. Warning: the industrial revolutions were not solely beneficial. They also brought with them major concerns, such as unprecedented environmental degradation, enabling of colonization, and at times massive unemployment. One of the major concerns with the coming of AI is just how it will make obsolete many tasks currently performed by humans, with the potential for us once again to see massive unemployment due to an industrial revolution. These concerns are certainly a challenge, but it is a challenge where the regulated engineering profession has a major role to play with its mandate to protect the public interest. It is in my contention that engineering regulators must be proactive, more vigilant, outward focused, with more market visibility if they are to meet these challenges to the best of our ability and to maximize the benefit to society. But I get ahead of myself. Jumping to a possible future vision for PO before understanding more of the context or environment in which we find ourselves practicing engineering today. By reviewing the past, and in particular the industrial revolutions, there are learnings to be had to understand better where regulated professions and POs in particular find themselves today in terms of current practices and relevance, and where the future may lead. Today, if one looks across Canada, one finds governments taking a bigger interest in the regulated professions, generally because either they are seen as imposing economic barriers on activity. Think of the immigrant engineer driving a taxi cab, as not sufficiently addressing public safety concerns. Think the condo fiasco or Mount Polley tailings pond breach in BC, or as restricting the supply of needed qualified personnel. Think doctor shortages. In Ontario, the government's very recent Fair Access to Regulated Professions and Compulsory Trades Act, abbreviated for PACTA, that applies to all regulated professions, not just PO, is a prime example of the government taking an active interest in addressing economic activity and fairness barriers by addressing the time barrier to licensure. For example, FARPACTA mandates that at least 90% of the licensing decisions must now be made within 6 months of an application for a PEng license. But to get a broader picture of what the future might hold for PO and self-regulation, one needs only to look west to British Columbia and Alberta. In 2018, British Columbia introduced the Professional Governance Act. It's an umbrella legislation with the intent of bringing consistent and independent oversight to engineers, geoscientists, foresters, applied biologists, agrologists, applied science technologists and technicians, and architects. In short, self-regulation of engineering in BC has taken a major hit. Whether this is good or bad is up for debate, but it is a fact. One question I have for you then is increased government intervention in self-regulation of engineering the best path forward to protect the public interest? I will let you contemplate on that. Next, looking towards Alberta, we find tech CEOs pressuring the Alberta government to intervene in their battle over the software engineer title, with the argument that restrictions on the title hamper the province's talent gains. If engineering regulator loses control over the title software engineering and software engineer, then this will be another nail in the relevance coffin of professional engineering licensing. So what may the future hold? And what will PEO need to be prepared for this future? To begin answering these two questions, let's consider two sets of statistics and two government-related impacts on the profession from just this past year. 92% of current PO applicants are confined to just 8 traditional and closely related engineering disciplines, while a mere 8% belong to the 22 other engineering disciplines recognized by PEO. Not only this, only about a quarter of engineering graduates in Canada seek licensure, with Ontario's rate being significantly below the national average. For now, I will let you digest these numbers and contemplate what they might mean for the future of engineering in Canada. From my perspective as an educator who conducts research using machine learning, that develops quantum algorithms for engineering applications, that supports my students who establish entrepreneurial businesses, and that teaches students who engage in emerging discipline co-ops, the future is not bright for the engineering profession if it does not embrace non-traditional and emerging disciplines. But this is just my perspective. What is your perspective? Answering this question from the perspective of all relevant stakeholders is the work of PEO's Future Vision strategic goal. But with the vision work, it is more than just about listening and understanding. It is also about providing a deliverable, a vision statement that can guide PEO into the future. Then we have the impact of PEO's mandatory continuing professional development program, also known as PEAK, which became effective January 1st, 2023. One of the major arguments for making PEAK mandatory concerned fear. Fear that if PEO did not implement mandatory CPD, it would be imposed by the government, with PEO having little to no say in its structure, accompanied by the fear of unintended consequences. Though PEO took the initiative with mandatory CPD, it was not prepared for FARPACTA, did not see it coming. FARPACTA becomes effective January 1st this year, 2023. FARPACTA is the first modern example in Ontario of the government imposing regulation on all professions, overriding their self-regulatory authority. Its focus is fairness, as judged by time between applying for licensure and receiving a licensing decision. PEO had to react fast. Having to react fast is one of the risks with such short time frame, unilaterally imposed legislation. fast responses generally result in missed opportunities and unintended consequences. And it was no different with Varpacta. For example, many engineering masters and PhD students with undergraduate degrees in physics, computer science, etc., are no longer able to obtain their PEng in Ontario. They must now go to other provinces. Yet, many of these students are the backbones of startups necessary for Canada's future technological competitive economy, involving emerging engineering fields such as autonomous vehicles, machine learning, AI, nanotechnology, additive manufacture, biomedical engineering, green energy, etc. The statistics given are not encouraging of POs to regulate more than just the traditional engineering disciplines. And concerns with the government may impose on PO are not imaginary concerns. When, not if, but when, external forces steer the PO ship in an undesirable direction, agility and a vision will be required. Agility to adapt quickly and minimize the impacts of going off course, and a vision to actually know in what direction to steer, as opposed to being tossed about by the wind of the day. To emphasize the need for PO to have a vision and a future vision, I will draw on an example I know everyone can relate to. COVID appeared suddenly, just as Varpacta, and it had to be tackled rapidly. First responses were chaotic, highly debated, with messaging and advice seeming to change almost daily. And inevitably, there were unintended consequences that depended on the form of the response. Messaging and advice is more stable now. However, throughout the chaos, and even now, there's always been one constant. Virtually everyone had the same future vision or goal of returning to normalcy. We're not there yet, but we are headed there because we know where we want to be. And though we may never completely return to pre-COVID normalcy, it becomes a long-term future vision or goal. Therefore, just as I believe being fully vaccinated and masking are necessary tools to help move us towards a pre-COVID normalcy future, and just as I believe we have to be agile in our COVID practices, I also believe an equitable admissions process inviting to emerging disciplines are necessary for PO's future if it is to be relevant beyond the traditional engineering fields of practice, and if there's to be a future value in a PEng beyond being simply just another credential. Wait a moment. This is my belief. But what is it that you believe should be guiding PO into the future? Today, we don't know. Hopefully, by the end of PO's future vision strategic goal endeavor, we will know. We'll have consensus on a common future target. In short, I wish to know and try and find consensus on what role PO should play in the fourth and fifth industrial revolutions, where math and computer science graduates, not just engineering graduates, will be at the forefront of economic and technological advancements. Before closing, I would like to add another personal vision for the future. I would welcome PO adding profession strengthening to its current core functions of regulation and governance, which I believe is well supported by the additional objects in the Professional Engineers Act. It would place chapters being categorized currently in the other function, which truthfully today has a very ambiguous place in the PO structure. Furthermore, a core function of professional strengthening would mean PO Council would be encouraged to work with the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers, OSPE, instead of its frequently expressed through action and inaction, perspectives that strengthen regulation and protection of the public interest does not depend on a strong advocacy body. For example, both PO and OSPI should see value in stronger whistleblower protection for professional engineers, or see advantages to coordinating on challenges of globalization and the licensing of entrepreneurs. There are certainly challenges facing the engineering profession, but engineers are also creative problem solvers who I know are capable of tackling these challenges in a positive, profession-enhancing, public protection involving way, provided we work together, seek the truth, trust, and engage in transparency. For those who are not aware, truth, trust, and transparency were the themes of Peter Manbridge's PO's 100th anniversary celebration keynote talk last year. And for me, these are three words that should not be forgotten as we venture into the future of the engineering profession together. I'm looking forward to a productive year working with my fellow counselors and staff. I am also very excited by the relatively unique opportunity the strategic vision goal work will bring to interacting and working directly with many more PO members and other stakeholders than normally would be the norm in a given year. In closing, let me say again just how honored I am to be your 104th president of the Association of Professional Engineers Ontario, and grateful for this opportunity to guide the engineering profession into the future as we develop an aspirational, robust, and realistic future vision for PO that seeks relevance and value for the PEng. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce my colleagues, including myself, the members of the PO Council for the 2023-2024 term are newly elected President-elect Greg Wojcik. Now, past President Nick Colucci. Newly elected Vice President Christopher Shaheen. Newly elected Councillors at Large Leela Notash and Glenn Sherning. Councillor at Large Vajahat Bande. East Region Councillor Tim Kirkby. Newly elected Eastern Region Councillor Michelle Liu. East Central Region Councillor David Kegel. Newly elected East Central Region Councillor Nanda Lewin. Newly elected Northern Region Councillor Luc Boberge. Northern Region Councillor Dana Montgomery. Western Region Councillor Vicky Hilborn. Newly elected Western Region Councillor Susan McFarland. West Central Region Councillor Papur Shankar. Acclaimed West Central Region Councillor Ravinder Singh Panesar. And their Lieutenant Governor and Councillor appointees, Arjen Aranja, Lauren Cutler, Andy Dryland, Paul Mandel, George Nikolov, Scott Shelsky, Uditha Senaratna, Sherlock Sung. Welcome PO's 2023-2024 counselors. please give a virtual applause to all our new councillors. I now declare concluded the 101st Annual General Meeting of the Association of Professional Engineers of Ontario. Thank you all for attending today.